honestly, I think something I'm striving for even more is to not have jokes, to have jokes that no one agrees with, quote unquote. That's not my job. I'm not a politician. Um, I'm not billing myself as a philosophical evening. I'm trying to make you laugh. I like to think that I'm not even there to say that one side's wrong and one side's right. I'm there to point out that everyone's full of shit. And, what you do with that is that's up to you. I think it's good to shake people a little bit. I think that could be comedy's job to uh, uh, turn the mirror to make someone look at themselves. But I'm not there to kind of bring you to a conclusion. That's just not what I'm selling, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think my views can be seen throughout what I say, but ultimately, I do want you to be able to come to my shows, even if you disagree with some of my quote unquote fundamental positions, because I think that's the only way art can sway people.
Hmm.
I think I think a lot of liberal art was, especially liberal comedy, it was so determined to, and I don't blame them. How do you exist in a Trump administration and not every day go, oh my God, this is crazy what this guy said.
Right.
But the problem with it is it allowed people to write you off because all you talked about was Trump. And it was hard because Trump makes himself such a, he says so much, he gives you so much to talk about. But I think it allowed a lot of these institutions to not be equally critical of Democrats and the other side in a way where the only people watching Colbert anymore are people who would vote for the Democratic nominee if somehow Eric Adams got the seat next time for president.
I
They're
agree.
they're falling the Democrats, off the cliff if need be, and it prevented it from A, being interesting. It was no longer surprising because every joke, the punchline was, well, Trump sucks. And then B, you're not swaying anybody. So in fact, you're even failing at the thing that your comedy has resorted to, which is kind of DNC propaganda at a certain point. And you're failing. You're not convincing anyone new.
Totally.
So you're just creating sludge, by my estimation.
So you're not a fan of vote blue no matter who.
Oh no, not at all. I mean, listen, I, I think I ultimately like I at the end of the day I am a like listen, the world is bad and you vote the lesser of two evils. That's ultimately where I'll get when push comes to shove because I'm very cynical about the world.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly the road to that, I think you should be fighting and kicking and screaming and trying to make any kind of sway that you can.
Right. I mean, this is what I think is pretty fascinating. And I even saw this yesterday with Bill Burr, who's just blown up in leftist circles for the stuff that he's been saying on his podcast. But he said to a journalist, like, stop asking me these questions. You guys need to grow your balls back. Should not even impetus, I think that's the wrong word, but should people be looking at comedians to hold up a mirror to society just in an artistic, funny way to shine light on these flat out atrocities that are happening?
I no, I don't think again, like I don't think that's comedians' jobs. I think it's so hard because it's like I don't think comedians should be viewed that way, but I think unfortunately the news landscape, they're the ones that shifted into entertainment. Like I think comedians, they'll talk about politics, of course, but like they shifted to like kind of the news to a degree, and then news entities shifted into full on entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all become so fucking muddled where I go, you shouldn't turn to comedians for the news, I also feel like you should barely turn to CNN for the news or Fox for the news. Or in a way, I'm like, none of this should be news. We have to go back to establishing some kind of divide between these two things. News needs to be boring again. But the
Yes.
problem is we live in such an entertainment focused world. It's like I see it more on like the news institutions need to figure out a way to make the facts more exciting in a factual way. They need to meet the lack of attention world that we live in. There has to be a way to get people to intake information in a way that meets them at their door on TikTok. Unfortunately, you're not getting rid of this stuff. How do you meet people on that level? And unfortunately, until the news does in some capacity, people are going to turn to comedians for the news. You know, uh, this is no slight on Josh Johnson, who's
I had a
kind of
feeling you were going
blown
to do
up in
that.
the last year,
Yeah.
but I know that people are going to Josh Johnson's clips for the news. They're going there for the summation. I mean, you could look at whatever Josh Johnson's last 10 stand-up videos are, but some of them are long form. I'm sure he's going to have something, if he hasn't already, about the tariffs. And people are going to get the facts about tariffs from him. I don't want that responsibility as a comedian.
Hmm.
I want to be able to say something, if I ever think of something funny about trade, but I don't want you to come to me for that. That's not my job. And unfortunately, I do think, and this is not about Josh, I think Josh is probably deeply more educated on these things than I could ever dream of being. But some comedians will take advantage of that. They will go, oh, people are coming to me for the news. I'll just keep talking about the news, or I'll have politicians on my show, and I'll be able to get people's clicks, and they'll turn to me not just for their comedy but for their news, and I'll double my revenue. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have that responsibility. And I do think comedians that tread too far in that territory should be held to journalistic standards at a certain point. And if it bites them in the ass, it should bite them in the ass. There needs to be some kind of separation, I think. Because if the waters get too muddled, then you mix up comedy with news and you start peddling misinformation.
Mm.
So I don't know. I don't really have a solution to it other than my own desire is to not become the news. I don't want politicians on my podcast, good or ones that I agree with or disagree with, because I don't want to be held to that standard of the news or of journalism. I'm there to be funny.
Right.
That's my goal. That doesn't mean I won't weigh in on things of a political nature, but I'm not having you come there for the facts. I might make fun of scientific discoveries, the way people talk about COVID or something else, but I'm not there to tell you what vaccines do or don't do
Hmm.
or how we should handle it. I might make fun of RFK, but I'm not going to propose who should be Secretary of Health. And I think there's a difference between the two, or that's what I'm striving for. I'm there to poke holes in things, to say that things are full of shit, to point out hypocrisies. I'm not there to propose solutions.
Hmm.
And does that mean that someone could say, hey, well, you're criticizing this. How would you do it? And I go, not my job. That's not what I am. I'm the court jester. I'm not part of the court. A lot of these comedians, they want a seat at the table. And I go, if you have a seat at the table, you're no longer the court jester. You're part of the royalty.
Mm.
And you should be insulted and made fun of because that's not, you're no longer part of the comedy class.
Interesting.
And they want the money. They want to live the life of the royalty. They want that amount of money. They want that amount of responsibility. And I go, okay, Dave Chappelle, if you want to go on Saturday Night Live and like point to the president and say, hey, man, here's some thoughts I have about how you should, okay, then go become a politician. But you don't get the label of comedian. You don't get the freedom of comedian while playing the politician.